So what is my biggest complaint about Hearts of Iron 4? Now, I already did a podcast with Justin on how we perceive it, and I'm an outspoken Hearts of Iron 3 fan because I like the operational side, and Hearts of Iron 4 focuses more on the economic side, and I sometimes call it an Albert Speer simulator. And I generally see, okay, I'm not so much into micromanaging these aspects, but my main issue is actually with the economic side. And my main issue with the game, and this only came out during the podcast actually, is there's a lack of coal. Now, of course, some people argue, well, coal is actually implicitly modeled in the game with steel together, because iron and steel. And another important aspect is usually that all the majors had enough. Now, these points I will address later in the video, because they are wrong. But first off, why I think coal is so important. Now, coal was the most important fuel in World War II, and this is not just my personal view, this is also the professional historians that view this way. Because you need coal for fueling your trains, and you need trains for your logistical side and industrial side. Then also for ships it was very important, especially for the merchant ships, and then also for the factories, for smelting and everything, and also for electricity. And it was also used for civilian heating. And for the Germans it was also used to substitute oil, so to produce from coal, produce some oil. And another issue is also it's used for producing cement. And if you think about the Atlantic Wall or the flag towers, you need a lot of cement to build these things. So now the major counterpoints that people bring up. But coal is modeled with steel. I don't know if this actually is the official statement or just from fans brought up, but it's clearly wrong. Because let's look at Sweden, which is quite ironic because Paradox is set in Sweden. So Sweden had plenty of iron ore and other materials, but they had a severe lack of coal and oil. And pre-war they got a lot of the coal from Poland. And as you can imagine, once Germany took hold of Poland, they needed to get the coal from somewhere else, so they argued with the British and also with the Germans, and looking at the geographical situations, they went with the Germans. But if you look at the stats Sweden has in-game, they have a lot of steel. But this doesn't add up, because if iron ore and coal are combined into steel in-game, then clearly Sweden couldn't have that much steel in-game. So that point, although in theory sounds rather interesting, yeah, it's clearly wrong. Now the other point is that people point out, but all the majors had a sufficient amount of coal anyway, so it's no need to model it. Well, of course I could be nitpicking and say, yeah, the point of Hearts of Iron is that you can pick any country and play with them, but actually this statement of every major had enough or surplus is not quite correct. So who had no surplus on coal mostly were they just had enough? That was the Soviet Union and Japan. Now one major aspect of the Second World War, and especially even more for Hearts of Iron, is their territorial changes. And with territorial changes, there come changes in your resource situation. So at this point, it's a moot point because it doesn't work anymore. And there's also more important because there was a limited dependency on imports, and this was for France, which is a major, and there was a major dependency on imports of coal for the Italians. So two majors have a lack of coal. And what actually happens with changes of territory, I'm going now into a more detailed example here. Because of many of you probably know that Germany has a surplus of coal, well, at least pre-war. But once the war started, they actually had quite some issues, especially after they conquered many countries, and for instance, they had to supply also Sweden, for instance, with coal. Now, technically on paper, Adam Tooze notes in 1940, after they conquered France, they had pretty much enough coal. But they didn't have it at the right places, so they need to ship it and everything. And the Germans actually noted to the French, okay, we need you to produce airplanes, and the French said, okay, we have bauxite, so we can produce aluminum, but we actually don't have enough electricity. So we need about 120,000 tons of coal each month.
And the Germans noted, we can give you 8,000.
As you can see, there was clearly not a surplus of coal here. Now, these are just my points. Very important here, gameplay first. Now, I like historical accuracy in some cases I don't care much, but here's the point. I agree if you tell me, okay, it's about complexity reduction and everything. So it makes sense to have only these 6 resources that are in-game. I agree with you. But if you point out, okay, all the majors had enough coal, this is clearly wrong, and coal is actually modeled with the steel thing. This is also wrong. So if you argue, okay, we couldn't introduce a 7th resource, or we think the other resources are more important for this and this reason, I say, hey, that makes sense. Because the thing is, it's about gameplay and fun is the most important. You could also argue, for instance, that coal is not diversified enough and that it's easily exploitable. Could also be the reason. I don't know. I didn't find an official statement. And also one point is now some important aspects Geyer brought actually up, the YouTuber, and he argued once, he thinks another resource would actually be more important, and he pointed out food. Now I can clearly make here a point why food is not in the game. And the main point is PR reasons. Because if your food was modeled in the game, you basically just open the war crimes department. And also the public relations aspect is that I'm pretty sure that the press would print, oh my god, you can't starve out Great Britain in this game or something else. So yeah, I mean, you could model it the other way, like you reduce the efficiency of everything, of your troops and your industry if you don't have enough food. But yeah, this would be kind of a problem. So for me, I completely understand why food is not modeled in the game, because yeah, this is just a political minefield in various aspects. And I know the Paradox tries to steer away quite understandable from this area, because yeah, it's not the way you want to go. So this is my reason. I think coal would be very nice to see in game and would make much sense. But again, there might be very good points for complexity gameplay reasons why coal is not in the game. But at least in think it should be addressed that, okay, coal is one of the most, or is the most important fuel in the Second World War, because I think sometimes also oil is a bit overemphasized. So anyway, let me know what you think. Thank you for watching and see you next time.